I have got to get a better setup for where I can put my laptop camera and computer when doing these things. This is not a great position for this. I got to do better. Right. Anyway, so what we were working on but failed to achieve. We did the meringues and we did the almond macaroons. Those are two things that I've made pretty frequently when visiting family and whatnot. So, the overall list that I started up here with the goal of doing 21 recipes that I could potentially do some alternative versions of them. So 21 total right now, before we look at alternatives, that I could compile potentially into a cookbook at some point. They're all desserts, so the book theoretically would be called Just Desserts. I'd have to look up and see what the possibility of that name already being taken would be, and may have to do some kind of play on that anyway. But I have the list of 21 here, and they're sort of loosely divided into three categories. So cakes and pies, or their equivalent, sort of like refrigerator desserts. So like ice creams and puddings and gelatins, and then more finger food kind of things. So like cookies and meringues and Rice Krispie treats and cannolis and those types of things. So 3 different sections of that kind of figured out. Now, to be fair, this is a category of food that I don't eat a lot of, but I have a lot of fun coming up with ways to do stuff. So I'm pretty certain I could come up with 60 more desserts in the course of a few years, just by playing off of variants off of some of these. But so here are the recipes that I started out with. So starting with the pies and cakes. I've never made a mock apple pie. I have tried a mock apple pie that family members have made, and one of the things that's interesting about it is they can have a tendency to be indistinctly fruity flavored. It's a very, like, is it apple? Is it pear? Is it peach? Like, it has like all the cues that it's fruit, but indeterminate. Like, if you expect it to be apple pie, you'll think it's apple pie. If you expect it to be pear or something similar to that, you'll think it's that. So I like the idea of making that intentional, so that you can start with the indistinctly fruity flavor, and from there take that in some new directions. So like one of the things I've been working on, and it's another one that it's not on this list that I could play with later, was I've been playing around with doing something experimental. And one of the experimental pies that I want to make is a cucumber melon pie. Now I can cook down cucumber and honeydew and a little bit of watermelon and get a very thin syrup, or something very similar to a watery applesauce. But I can't thicken it much past that. I could add something like a tapioca flour to get more of a custard to thicken it. But that's still going to be a thickened juice rather than anything with any texture to it. Now, if I cook down the cucumber and melon slices into pieces and juice some of it and thicken some of it, I could potentially get more of a sliced food in there to give it some texture and tooth to the bite. But the other thing that's a possibility is taking something like a mock apple pie, where in fact what you're using is like a Ritz cracker, and it's flavored so that the flavor makes you feel that the texture of the soggy cracker is a piece of fruit. Now, I'm not like I'm not thinking that I'll use that for the cucumber melon pie. I'm thinking just on the topic of a mock apple pie, a mock fruit pie having the texture of a fruit with a little bit of tartness and sweetness from the flavors added to it, but it's otherwise a blank canvas onto which I can play with a lot of things. Like there was something I was doing the other day. I was in the grocery store and I had encountered a dried kiwi. I'd never had dried kiwi, so I'm sort of like, I'm curious what that would taste like. So I was eating it. I was eating a couple slices of it at one point, and I go, I'm trying to figure like really pick apart how this flavor fits in a flavor profile. Like, how would I class this, and what kind of pairings can I imagine with this? And just every now and then, there's a little chunk of my muse in the back of my head that comes up with these crazy ideas. And that's part of why I do this channel is at a certain point, it's like my muses are like, hey, what would happen if we do this? And I'm like, why don't we just do it? And so in the back of my brain, uh, one of those little muses peeked up and said, you know, I can almost see like using like a dried chili. So like kiwi and uh, uh I want to say maybe like a little bit of jalapeno or a chipotle, a chili chipotle tart or a kiwi chipotle tart would be definitely different, but I do think the flavors might go well. Okay, it might go well enough together that it would be interesting to try. So that's sort of one of the things that, and using a mock apple pie as the base for it. Yeah, I kind of got lost there for a second. A mock apple pie as a base for it, with some kiwi and a little bit of like if you used the mock apple pie base and added like the juice from a jalapeno, or I don't think you want to go as high as a habanero, maybe, um, but you get the juice or some of the flakes from uh, some peppers and put it in a mock apple pie with slices or chunks of kiwi in it. I'd be curious to see how that turned out. Um, and I could do something like you could try to make the pie filling with a non-fruity context to it. So if you wanted to do something like um, trying to think of some other drink, so like a coffee or yeah, I could see doing something like a coffee and like a caramel sauce pie, and having those that I, in that case it's just crackers carry the flavor of the liquid. So it's just, you don't have to make it like a gelatin in the middle of the pie. It's it's a filling with that flavor. I think there are ways to definitely play with a mock apple pie. So just getting a little experience with the first round of that is sort of something that I would love to be able to get a chance to, if I had a whole kitchen to myself that I could do this in, and not that little chunk of thing that I had to play with when I did the last cooking. Um, or get a series of ingredients and just have the ability to do that as just a little dabble. I think as I was playing around, and I don't think it made it into the cut. I think when I was doing the recording for the meringues, I made a statement that I think it skipped. It paused, it skipped in the video and skipped it. Um, I kind of want to get an apron with it printed on the front, and it could probably be the new catchphrase for my cooking themed projects is commencing culinary experimentation, or uh, something to that effect. And so, commencing culinary improvisation, and that was, I think that would be a good, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to sit here and say like, oh, here is this classic recipe, unaltered from 400 years ago, about how to make this thing that nobody eats anymore. Like, that's not my thing. My thing is, here are several ingredients. What can we do with it? What kind of fun can we have with flavor? I, I need to find a better position. Okay, so, okay, there we go. And so culinary improvisation is definitely my style. A good example of that was the next one on the list here is the spice cake that's usually done with raisins. It's called a war cake from what I saw, and it comes from when they were rationing, and so it doesn't use eggs, and it doesn't use milk, and it doesn't use butter. It uses lard or an equivalent fat. And in this day and age, my instinct says, like, we're not rationing right now. And a food that we are more familiar with and easily encounter that can compensate for the lard content without being vegetable shortening, which is really not good for you. A healthier option would be coconut oil. So coconut oil, spices, and instead of raisins, I want to use the dried pear. I'm having trouble finding dried pear, but I could probably dry my own pear or order pear from Amazon and use those. And then some sugar, and you basically cook it up, cook the oil, sugar, water, dried fruit, and spices into a syrup that you then mix into the all-purpose flour, and you bake. And once you've baked it in a bundt pan, it comes out as a moist, crumbly cake that you can enjoy. Now, my first instinct is to, replace the raisins with dried pear, but also the realization that I could do other things with it. So we have craisins, which are a sweet, like raisin made from cranberries that have a tartness to them. If you use craisins instead of raisins, and you use an orange marmalade instead of powdered sugar or a butter icing on the top of it, I think you could get a really decent spiced cranberry orange cake. And you could do an apple cranberry. You could do I bet you if you could find dried strawberries, there would be a way to make a strawberry spice cake. And I could almost say use freeze dried or dried banana and make an icing for it that way. And I think that would probably be pretty good. And so that's all based off of improvisation with the spice cake. Now, my recipe for banana bread is an example of my past improvisation with recipes. That one is the biggest difference on that one is exchanging all of the butter in the recipe for vanilla yogurt. And I found that makes a very dense, chewy, moist cake of a banana bread. And when you slice it and you toast it, and the outside's crispy, and you put a little butter on the slice of it, or you can sprinkle it with a little like cinnamon or sugar, or like it makes good muffins too. Um, it's a pretty tasty alternative, and honestly, like regular banana bread, I don't have a taste for anymore. Like a regular banana bread is like meh, but the vanilla yogurt, the vanilla actually gives it a creamier, sweet richness to it that I really enjoy. And the protein added to it gives it a chewiness and a bounce to the bite that's delicious. Um, and then the next one on the list for the cakes and pies was a chocolate raspberry no bake cheesecake. Now, I did something like this for, I believe it was one of my mother's birthdays. And so it was a no bake cheesecake that we made, and that I used a dark chocolate to mix into the cheesecake mix. So cheesecake was a chocolate cheesecake all the way through. And then we used a raspberry drizzle that I did to write on the surface of the cake. And so a raspberry drizzle across the top of a chocolate cheesecake. That was pretty good, honestly, I think. Now, not everybody's into a cheesecake, and not anybody who likes a cheesecake is going to necessarily want it chocolatized, but I think it worked pretty nicely. Speaking of chocolate, the next one on the list is essentially a chocolate pecan pie. And I know I've had this at some point. I just can't remember where. I feel like it had to be something like a grandparent made. But yeah, it's essentially just you make a chocolate sauce and pecans and you bake them into a pie. And uh, it's it's a different it's a different type of pie than what I'm used to seeing. We do a lot of fruit pies. We don't do a lot of chocolate pies. And part of why I want to play with it is as a base for play, like I know I can get French vanilla chips. So they're like a chocolate chip, but they're French vanilla. I know I could get some butterscotch chips, white chocolate. I could do. I recently saw some maple chips that you could do. And so, with all these different types of chocolate chip substitutes, using them as the base for your chocolate alternative, and you could do walnuts instead of pecans. You might even be able to get away with like a few of the other types of nuts. And so, like a macadamia and uh, macadamia and chocolate really go nicely together. Um, but yeah, there's a whole room full of play on that one. Uh, Speaking of the maple chocolate chips, the next one on the list was the maple cinnamon funnel cake. And that one, I've never made funnel cake before. I don't think I've even ever tried funnel cake. I've had those, what do they call them? Elephant ears. It's essentially just a deep fried tortilla sprinkled in powdered sugar. But a funnel cake is something I've not tried before. And it seems like it's a cross between like a waffle and like a pancake batter, and it's drizzled into a big tangled mess into the deep fryer. So it's something between a pancake and a donut with a a little more crisp, somewhat more like a waffle, like a toaster waffle. And because of that, I thought putting cinnamon or putting maple and some cinnamon on top would have been nice. But since it is essentially just a waffle or a donut, and all the different ways you can top those off, there are a bunch of ways I can make a bunch of different things with this. And then the last one in the cakes and pie section is inspired by my favorite Girl Scout cookie from when I was younger. And they used to call them Moas. I think they call them Coconut Dreams now. Um, it is essentially like a shortbread cookie with caramel and coconut with chocolate drizzled over top of it. Now, my goal was to make something like that in a cupcake form. And that one doesn't have as much room for improvisation after I figure out how to do the base recipe. But I mean, you could do other types of shaved or um, toasted nuts. You could do other than chocolate. You could do other kinds of. So you could do like a caramel or a white chocolate or a butterscotch coating, and you can replace the caramel with, I guess, any kind of syrupy mixture. So there's a little bit of improvisation that can be done with that style, but we'll see if we can do a decent cupcake to start with from it. Now the refrigerated desserts was one I was kind of really into playing around with. I wanted to do a cookie dough ice cream, and once you get that kind of figured out, you can do. There are different types of cookie dough, and there are different types of ice cream that you can put into it. So instead of doing like a vanilla ice cream with chocolate chip cookie dough, you could do a chocolate ice cream with fudgy brownie bits or fudgy brownie dough. You could do a strawberry ice cream with you could probably do a peanut butter cookie dough, and you could get like a PB&J ice cream. PB&J cookie dough ice cream. That would be weird. And that's the fun of this to me, is the improvisation. Um I was gonna see if I could do a pistachio flavored frozen yogurt, and that's just getting to the point where I can dabble a little bit with learning to do a homemade flavored frozen yogurt. The ice cream sandwiches is something I improvised with once before. It's brownie crust and cooked into discs and then filled with mint chocolate chip ice cream in between. Now, again, pick a different flavor of ice cream, and instead of doing a brownie crust, you can do a blondie or a strawberry shortcake or something like that. And so there's improvisational possibilities there. And then the next one on the list was mint chocolate pudding. Mint and chocolate, they are one of the best combinations that have ever existed. And I've had mint chocolate chip ice cream. I don't think I have ever had a mint and chocolate pudding. And I'd be sort of curious to see what I could make happen there. And I mean, I suppose if you wanted to, if you made a chocolate pudding, you could also do a raspberry chocolate pudding. There are a few different alternates that you can do that are good combinations for that. Um, The next one is a weird one. That was the root beer float gelatin dessert. And that's seeing if I could get a vanilla ice cream jello made and and a root beer gelatin made and stack them in a way that when you take a spoonful, you get a root beer float kind of flavor. And I do think there's a few ways to do a little bit more tinkering around with different soda flavored gelatin desserts. But to me, like the root beer flavored gelatin dessert with an ice cream flavored gelatin combo, I think would be awesome to try to achieve. And then lemon ginger Italian ice. And I'm one of those people who a fruity flavored thing is good, but a fruit plus another flavor is always more interesting to me. So one of the things, like, I want to play around with making some candies at some point, and one of the candy things I want to tinker around with is, like, we have fruity Starburst and we have fruity Skittles. I have never heard of anybody making something like um, a cinnamon flavored Skittle or a like a ginger snap flavored Starburst. Like, I want to be able to come up with things like that and combining, like, if somebody makes a cinnamon Skittle, that's great. But an apple cinnamon Skittle is one that I definitely have never seen. And a lemon ginger flavor is a good combination of flavors. So making things like Italian ices, which usually have a fruity flavor to them, making them a fruity and a spicy flavor, it opens up a whole venue of different flavors and experiments. To a whole lot of improvisation opens up. And so those are the refrigerated desserts that I'm sort of playing around with the recipes on. Now, the finger food ones come next. The one that everybody used to love at the kitchen I used to work in is pumpkin whoopie pie. I don't know why they all love that so much. It's a pumpkin cake, little discs of pumpkin cake with it's like a whipped cream filling, pretty much. I don't get the fascination with it, but it is what it is. And uh, if you can do a pumpkin whoopie pie, you can do a carrot whoopie cake, red velvet whoopie pies. Um, it's essentially just little bits of cake, and instead of like a thick icing, it's like a whipped icing in the middle. That's all it is. It's just a inverted cake in small sandwich form. But yeah, once you dabble with the basic shape and form of the cake, pie, whatever you want to call it, um, all the other options are open to you. The next one on my list for that category was s'more cannolis. And this one was make the cannoli shell, fill it with a chocolate ricotta, because cannolis are usually filled with a dessert ricotta. And then toast some mini marshmallows. I was thinking the way I might do this is give a light coat to the inside of the cannoli with the chocolate ricotta mix, and leave enough of a channel down the middle that I can take a barbecue skewer and toast like 4 to 6 mini marshmallows on it, and then drag that through the cannoli in the middle, and deposit them on the inside and make a s'more cannoli. I could dabble with some other things with making cannolis, but s'more is one of those things there's only really, you only get to do it right once. There's so many people who have made s'more flavored, like M&Ms, s'more flavored cookies, Oreos, whatever. Everybody tries it. Everybody gets it completely wrong. And I sort of feel like s'more cannoli is one of those ones that could get it really, really right. And then ginger snap cookies is one of my favorite types of cookies. It's also one of those things that if you wanted to, you could do a lemon icing on it. So again, that lemon ginger flavor combination would be really nice. And if you can do ginger snap cookies, what other spices can you make into a snap cookie? I'm kind of curious to see what I can do with it. Like a cinnamon snap cookie. That would be kind of spicy. Like the next one on the list is a snickerdoodle, which is just a cinnamon sugar cookie. But a ginger snap isn't like a dusting of ginger on a sugar cookie. It's a fully flavored cookie. Now, the flavors you're usually getting on that aren't just ginger, but ginger is the one that comes through the most. And so by adjusting the proportions of some of those things or omitting the ginger and focusing more on some of the other flavors, you could get a very cinnamony cookie. So it's going to have like a Red Hots, the cinnamon Red Hots flavor to it. And that can be kind of good. I know another one that would be fun to experiment with, and it would probably be super weird and probably not something a lot of people seek out. But what you usually get in those spice combinations are cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, ginger, clove. Now, you could do a nutmeg snap cookie, I guess, but I'm more interested in seeing like a clove snap. I'm curious to see what we could pull off with that. And I feel like part of that might be a little bit of exchange. Like in some cookies, people exchange one ingredient for some other ingredients. And oftentimes you see people who put in a, like an applesauce. So a little bit of applesauce, a little of orange zest, and a pinch of cinnamon, and then a fair amount of clove, I think could make for an interesting cookie flavor. You'd have to have other things in there to complement the flavor by also reducing the abundance of that flavor. Because clove is one of those things that it's a good flavor with other things, but it's not something you can snack on. You can't just mix clove and sugar and expect it to taste good. It's a very interesting change in a recipe to try to pull that off. Now, I did the pumpkin spice meringues, I did the almond macaroons, and that leaves my experiments with the marshmallow crispies. I've made butterscotch, I've made peppermint, I've made apple spice crispy treats. So I was going to dabble with one or two of those recipes this month too. And that's pretty much all of the recipes I had sort of plotted out for the desserts. I will probably be portioning them out a little bit over time. But I do think I will continue to play with these, and they will eventually appear as a recipe book. I feel like I have to at that point. And they may each have the base recipe and then a few alternative improvisations that I came up with based off of them. And I mean, we've already got 21 here, so if each one of those had 2 alternatives, it's 63. That's a decent sized cookbook. and yeah, that's sort of where my brain's at right now. I'm a little upset that I didn't get the chance to do more of this, and I have to figure out at some point a way I can do that. And that may just be down to in the next 6 months of doing videos for this channel. I may end up just changing over to not filming live, but doing them as some of those premieres, I guess we call them, where the video goes up as a pre-recorded video scheduled to launch at a certain time, and it'll have a point where it'll say a video goes up and it says, coming up tomorrow night at 8 p.m. or whatever, the next episode, you can check in. And then when it goes live, the live chat appears on the right-hand side like it does here. And I can be present and chat with people in the chat while the video plays. And so I think I may do that kind of thing for some of the things that are more visually intensive that the camera doesn't handle well. And for like the other part of these recipes that made it difficult this time was I got away with the almond macaroons because their cook time was 8 minutes. The pumpkin spice meringues, they took 3 hours after mixing to cook up. So that's less than ideal for trying to do a cooking show. And most of the rest of these would have a 30 to 45-minute bake time, or in the case of the dessert ones, 1 to 2 hours in the refrigerator or freezer. They're all desserts. What do I mean by dessert? I mean the cold ones. They would require multiple hours in the fridge or freezer. And that just doesn't make for scintillating live content. So if I'm going to do some of these in the future, I may do them as those premiere type videos. But we're actually approaching 40 minutes. I didn't think we were going to get that much out of that topic there, but tonight is the last night of this is like the rest night of my intensive exercise routine. I am taking tomorrow off. It's been 98 degrees in this house all day, and the air conditioner is making horrible noises, so it's impossible to sit next to it and do anything. I'm sweating like crazy all the time. You can see the shine. And I'm ready to stop with the hot weather. I'm ready to not be doing exercise in the hot weather. I'm ready for a day off or two. And I'll do a little bit more during the week before, I can't believe I'm 3 days away from VidCon. I'm not ready. Like, I get on a flight 3 days from now. I will be in the air on my way. Well, I should be, what are we, almost midnight here. Yeah, at this time on Wednesday, I will be landing in LAX. And I will probably be spending a good chunk of the night in the airport till I get the bus over to the convention center. And then I'm at the convention Thursday. Check into my Airbnb. Friday, convention, Airbnb. Saturday, convention. And then I don't know what I'm doing. My flight leaves on Sunday, and I may just be up for 36 hours. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Well, that's good. I have tinkered around with making some sugar-free desserts in the past. I think the biggest problem I had with sugar-free desserts was making a sugar-free meringue. That doesn't work. It needs the sugar to bind it in the right form. And so when I tried to make a sugar-free meringue, what I got was a just like a puff of smoke that set into a shape, and if you touched it, it crumbled. But out of the bottom of this puff of smoke was oozing what looked like dried Elmer's glue. It was so gross. So yeah, sugar-free meringues don't work. Um, you might be well, no, I don't think you can do the almond macaroons either because they are a close cousin of a meringue. Yeah, I would avoid them too. They're not really good for you. Stevia is okay. Um, you can get away with one or two of them, all right. They're not super bad for you, but like at a certain point, it just makes more sense to just not eat it. Just if it's something sweet and you like, I see so many people do things like the keto diet, and they're like, well, I want to have like waffles in the morning, so I made this recipe for keto waffles. I'm like, it defeats the purpose, guys. It's just the reason keto works for you is you're not eating the things that are bad and encourage you to eat bad. Like eating keto cookies isn't better than eating just cookies. It's just changing one bad choice for another bad choice. Get used to not eating cookies. It's better for you in the long run. Have a piece of fruit. Um, but I know some people who also struggle with the uh, they've never had meat without some kind of sauce on it. They never had salad without some creamy gloop on top of it. They've never had like they don't drink water. Like they never drink water. It's always a juice or a soda or a sugar tea, a sweet tea. Like they've never just had a glass of water. That's so weird to me. And so like yeah, I certainly get that some people have just never had the experience of just eating real food in a natural way that's suited to the body, and they've learned all these habits like their comfort foods are bad foods for them. They're like you never have a meal without cake or cookies after it. You never have uh, an afternoon where you don't have a candy bar in the middle of the afternoon. All of your lunches are going to be sandwiches with bread and cheese and some kind of meat, or their egg salad or something like that. And all breakfasts are toast with jam and cereal and a glass of like apple juice or something like that. And like that's just solid straight carbohydrate. It's like your entire day is nothing but carbohydrate. And as somebody who's been doing that for when did I start? What day is it? It's the 6th. I've been doing it for 7 days at this point. And I can honestly say I don't find it satisfying. A carbohydrate focused diet really doesn't cut it for me. I'm not a fan. But I know there's a whole bunch of the population who's never eaten any other way. And so they're at a loss for trying to do anything else. That's just the way it is. So it's probably best if you figure out how to go another way and just start over and do everything. Don't try to fake yourself out with some knockoff. Like I've seen people do things like low fat potato chips or whatever. Just don't eat chips. Like if you're that worried about the calorie count on your chips, just don't eat them. Find another crunchy food that satisfies you. salads, fish, baked potato. That's probably not a bad, unhealthy way to go. Now, a lot of people are convinced there's the old world thinking that butter and sour cream are not good for you, and as near as I can tell, as long as you don't have a super bad ability, like if you have uh, liver problems or kidney problems, I think, um, then your ability to process them might not be good for you. But you're not. I suppose it also depends on a certain metabolism aspects, but um, people used to say, like, don't eat eggs, they're not good for you because they'll raise your cholesterol. And I used to have high bad cholesterol, low good cholesterol, high blood pressure, and my triglycerides were off the charts. And for a month and a half, I had eggs at every breakfast. And when we went back in for some blood tests, I had low bad cholesterol, higher good cholesterol. My triglycerides went all the way back down to low end of normal. My blood pressure went all the way down to where it should have been. I lost weight. And, you know, everybody's saying, like, oh, eggs are bad for your cholesterol. Like, butter is treated the same way. Everybody's like, oh, butter's bad for you. It'll give you a heart attack. It's like, no. Cookies and table sugar are more likely to raise your triglycerides and give you heart health issues and cholesterol issues. Butter is actually not that bad for you. If you wanted to swap butter out for something else, you could do something like coconut oil. It has a very buttery flavor profile, and it's a simpler fat that's healthier for your body anyway. But I mean, for the most part, it's not gonna hurt too much. But I can understand with a potato. When I was younger, we had rice or potato with every meal, and it was always such a bland, starchy meal additive. I hated them both. And I used to take A1 sauce and I would pour it all over the baked potato. I would mash it into it and then pour more on it and mash that into it until you had like a very vinegary, sauced up mashed potato combination. And that was the only way I would eat them anymore. Or ranch dressing. I did it with ranch dressing a few times too. I struggle with potato. I still not a huge fan. Fish is good for you. Salads is good as long as you're not drenching it in like a Caesar or a ranch dressing. I would favor at that point a little balsamic vinegar and a bit of oil. Or you could do, I like to do a little bit of lemon juice. Just spritz some lemon juice over a salad and call it good. Put a few pieces of meat in it. Like a ham, a lean ham, maybe a little shredded Parmesan. And that's all fairly right for you. I mean, it depends on the ratios of what you add to it. But yeah, I mean, it can be, what just happened there? My computer freaked out a bit. Tabasco on everything but ice cream. Actually, I hear some people have put hot sauce on ice cream. And I hear some okay things about it, depending on which hot sauce and which ice cream. Tabasco's not my style usually. That's a little too. It's too specific a flavor profile. I don't mind a like an A1 or an HP steak sauce on things. But that's because it's almost a little bit more like a mix of barbecue, ketchup, and vinegar. Whereas a Tabasco is
really just a spicy pepper sauce and a vinegar mix. It doesn't have enough of a flavor profile for me to be interested in it. But that being said, like, I don't eat enough foods these days that require any of those things. I use some soy sauce, some wasabi, some diced pickled ginger. I kind of got into my honey mustard that I made during the sauce one, and I still have some of that. I drizzle on some things every now and then. There's just there's not a lot of things I need to sauce. I think one of the things I am going to potentially do is, as I continue to go through the carbohydrate month, one of the things I have a fair amount to do is noodles. I can do like a spaghetti or an angel hair pasta, but I can also do rice noodles. And I feel like I can get those ramen noodle packets for 25 cents a piece. That's easy to get a bunch of those. But I don't use the seasoning packet in them. They're horrible. They're a nightmare on my stomach, and they're really not that tasty. But I'm thinking of the sesame ginger dressing that I made during the sauce cooking episode. And I feel like if I made that dressing, if I cook up the rice noodles and just put a little bit of that dressing on top of those noodles, that would be pretty tasty. Maybe toss in a few like stir fry vegetables with it. That would be great. That would be an awesome, awesome dinner. And I feel like I kind of want to do that. Oh, you're not a spice lover, huh? Okay. Well, I guess we can't be friends then. No. And there is an aspect of that. I had a fair amount of conversation with a friend of mine years ago when we were talking about food flavors, and he's like, I don't get these people who are just eating spicy to get spicy. Like, spice is a flavor that's meant to complement other flavors. If that's all you get from it, you've ruined the food. And I can get that mentality. I understand that. There are, however, spicy flavors that you can add to food that contribute and complement the flavor if it's done right. Like, a good example is an unspicy chili is boring. A good chili has a meatiness to it, a tomatoey flavor, a little bit of sweet. It has the beans that add that sort of starchy flavor to it, maybe even a little bit of corn. And then it has, if you use the right kind of spice, if it's like a chipotle, it's going to have like a smokiness that it adds to it. And like a jalapeno adds sort of like a, not quite citrus, but like it, when you get a sweet, sort of tangy pepper, like a bell pepper, some of the bell peppers that exist, like a yellow pepper, a red pepper, or a green pepper, they have a little bit of a distinctive flavor that's like a, not quite a fruit, but similar to a fruit to them. And with that flavor profile and something like a smokiness from a chipotle, those are flavors they add to the dish, and the heat from the spiciness of it gives it a little back end flavor. But if it's done right, you get the flavor first and the heat as a slow hint in the background that builds. And I don't even mind if it builds up enough to a warm glow in my mouth. I've made a chipotle ranch dip that people remember to this day, a decade later, with fond memories, because it starts off with a creaminess. It just a rich creaminess in the flavor, and then slowly you get the taste of like the dill with the onion and the garlic coming in, and then you get that herby flavor profile. with a little hint of like a pepper flavor in there, and then it builds a warmth up behind it gradually, and it's just like it's done just right so that it complements what you're using it on. It's not a mask for a flavor. It's like the reason I liked HP or A1 steak sauce on potatoes is because I can't stand the bland starchiness of a baked potato. I can't stand it. It's disgusting. I hate it with a passion. And so in that case, I'm trying to make it so that it's the sauce I'm tasting, not the potato. And so like that's that's the wrong way to eat a food. Unless you're one of those individuals who can't be made to eat their vegetables. Like they literally just can't eat. They can't eat. You couldn't make them eat a salad without them gagging if it didn't have a dressing on it. Then, yes, I guess you need to get yourself to a point where you can eat the food and then decrease how much you're covering it a little bit until you're gradually using less and less of it until you're actually able to tolerate the flavor of vegetables. Yeah, that's a sort of a rare use case scenario, though. Hot sauces, I think, have their place, and I feel like a certain number of Asian dishes would be unfortunate if they didn't have some of that spice to add a little bit of variety to how the food works. I'm thinking of some of my favorite spicy Chinese foods and a few of my favorite Indian dishes. They benefit from having a bit of a spice profile. But that's my preference. I know some people who they prefer bland food. I don't understand it, but each their own, I guess. Um, I I feel like there are a lot of ways you can work with food. I think one of the most important things anybody should ever do is go back as far back to the basics of the food that you're eating as you can and just do that for a few weeks because we've gotten so used to being able to cover everything in a myriad of flavors that we've forgotten what actual food tastes like. So like every now and then just bake a chicken breast with nothing to flavor it and eat plain chicken on a plate with plain broccoli. Don't salt it, don't pepper it. Just eat that a few times. Eat plain fish, eat plain eggs. And then when you've done all of that, when you introduce things back, it'll totally change how you perceive them. I can tell you back when I was younger, I did some practice. I did some low carb eating for a little while. It was back when I did the eggs, and it changed my cholesterol profile. The when I did this routine, this diet change, it involved getting rid of pretty much all sugar, all starches, all breads, all pastas, everything. And you're just down to mainly lean meat like poultry, eggs, and vegetables. And you couldn't even eat all vegetables because some vegetables are sweeter vegetables. So, like, no snow peas, no carrots. So, you basically had like leafy greens and fish, chicken, and eggs. And I did that for like 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, I could introduce in some things again. And so it was like introduce a banana here and there, put peas and carrots back into your food, and those types of things. And the first day I got into that again, I had a cooked carrot and I went, holy crap, this tastes like candy. It tastes like candy. I haven't had anything this sweet in 2 weeks. And you could wrap this in a candy wrapper and sell it to me as candy. it was a carrot. It was a cooked carrot, but it was amazing. And here's the thing: 3 weeks before that, if you gave me a carrot, I wouldn't have even noticed anything interesting about the flavor. I would have considered it just like a very vegetable, a very dry, crunchy, almost woody flavor. But 2 weeks without anything sweet and a cooked carrot tastes like candy. And so it made me wonder at a certain point, what other things have I not tasted because I've become taste blind? I'm so used to a cacophony of flavors in my mouth that I had no sense that carrot actually had a flavor worth paying attention to. And so I started to learn a lot more about the flavors of things and how they play against each other and the subtleties of certain flavors that I was missing before that. It was definitely an eye-opening experience for me. Alrighty, we're at an hour. It's past midnight here, so I got to do my last round of exercise for the week and finish up a few things and start planning for tomorrow, I guess. Yep, I've got a boatload of things I need to do. Alrighty, I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Take care and have a good night. Feet fell asleep again. Ouch.